We did our big questions heading into the 2024 season yesterday, and so many of them were schematic that I thought we needed to have our pal Dusty Evely on the show today for our first Expert Tuesday of 2024. Let's do this.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Dusty Evely joins us on the show today to talk about the questions that we wanted to get answered. What does the offensive evolution look like for the Green Bay Packers? What will Jeff Hafley's defense look like for the Green Bay Packers? And so I wanted to try and answer some of those questions on our first Expert Tuesday. For those of you unfamiliar with the show, it's your first year here. Thank you so much for being with us. We love that you chose Locked On Packers for the 2024 Packers season, hopefully well beyond that. Expert Tuesday, something we have on Tuesdays. Our pal Lily Zhao for Zhao You Doing. On Wednesdays, our crossover every Thursday, and then we're going to have another interview for you on Fridays. We will have one this Friday as well. And then we're going to go live after every game, which is a thing we are going to do every single week this season. Friday after the game, we'll be live on YouTube. Go check that out. In the meantime, let's talk to Dusty. Joining me now, our first Expert Tuesday of the 2024 season, our longtime pal, Dusty Evely. John Kuhn was unable to join us tonight, so we got Dusty. And Dusty, everything that you have going on right now, Acme Packing Company, our old stomping grounds here. I love to see it. I love that is happening for you. And so everyone should go check out everything that's happening over at Acme Packing Company. Dusty, we did our show yesterday and we talked about the questions that are still needing to be answered. And as I'm going through it, I'm like, okay, offensive schematic stuff I want to talk about, defensive schematic stuff I want to talk about. Okay, we got to talk about some of this stuff. And so I thought, who better to talk about that with than you? So I'm very excited to do this. Let's start on defense because we don't know what Jeff Hafley's going to do, right? And so that's what makes this so intriguing. When you found out it was Jeff Hafley and he's bringing this, San Francisco kind of scheme, but maybe more single high than even Robert Saleh and D'Amico Ryan's play. What's your first reaction to all of this?
It's something different. Like, is the first thing, like with all other Packers fans, analysts, whatever, like I got very deep into the quarters world, right? Like I bought, you can see it on the shelf behind me, every single book Cody Alexander wrote. Buddy, I got it. Like, I'm doing research, man. I'm diving in because that's the world that we were in, and that's what the NFL was in. So it's something different. And I think there's a downside. There's downsides to everything. As I think Ben Fennell always says, if there's one perfect defense, everyone would run it. Like there's downsides to everything. But my initial reaction was, this is kind of cool. This is something different. And then kind of thinking about where he came from, some of the BC stuff. I started going back to his Boston College stuff. It feels like it really suits the talent that the Packers have. Like it has like the dudes that want to, like if you think of, okay, they want to get up in your face. And one of the first things I did, dude, as I'm sure a lot of nerds did, was he's got on YouTube, Hafley has is like an hour of a terribly shot thing he did on like press coverage. You were the same night. I assume you were the same. We were watching at the exact same time.
Yep.
You watch that and go, okay, he wants guys like, not necessarily you're playing like press man all the time, but like you want to give those guys trouble at the line, no matter what the coverage is. And like, okay, they got Jair. They've got Stokes, who I think could thrive in that. Carrington Valentine, who just wants to talk and smash people in the face.
I
Like,
love it.
this is what they want to do. So the initial response was like, this will be different. And the more I got into it, like, man, this really, even the D line, like this fits, I think, what a lot of those talents are. So it got me, it went from this could be kind of fun. And then watching some of his blitz package stuff and seeing all of that, like this could fit this defense really, really well. It's like, I'm super hyped about that.
I listen to Solid Verbal and those guys always talk about in a college way, new defensive coordinator comes in and what do they always say? We want to be multiple and we want to pin our ears back. You know, there's all of these buzzwords, right?
Uh-huh.
And Jeff Hafley is just like, he's in that first press conference, checking all the boxes. And we're just sort of like, okay, I'm letting myself get sucked in. Because we always get sucked into those kinds of guys. But the more I hear Jeff Hafley talk, I just like, it doesn't seem like artifice to me. And I like to think that I'm not as gullible as maybe I used to be when I was younger with some of this stuff. When you hear him talk about football, are you also getting excited? Like, are you also like this guy understands the art of this thing?
Yeah. I mean, I don't care too much about like coach press conferences. Like that's something I will watch.
That's why I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, but like as far as the stuff that I do, like there are tidbits I will glean. I will watch Hafley's press conferences. Like and part of it is like you get all the, like I said, the press man, you're playing aggressive, pin your ears back, blah, 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 all that stuff. The thing that you heard to a man when Hafley was hired, and that was like Richard Sherman was talking about this. Like a lot of guys that have played with him was he's a teacher. Like he teaches this well. You could watch, like you said, that you watch the press man thing with him. You watch any clips of him on the field with guys. Like it's the communication to get across like that. And I think that's where I've come with defense over the years. Like schematics or schematics, whatever. Like there are like 3 or 4 base defenses you will see in the NFL. Like there's really not that much variety. It's how you teach it. It's the specifics on how you do that allow you to kind of play within that sandbox a little bit, right? Like how you operate, how well those guys know that. And that comes down to teaching. And you listen to that guy. Like it's not, when I listen to his press conferences, is not excited about him as like a rah-rah guy. He's going to go down there. He's going to be like punching dudes in the chest. Like he's getting everyone hyped up. He's coaching from the booth anyway. But like, I don't get that feeling. What I get is like, that dude is like a communicator. That dude's like, you can see like what his strength was when they hired him as this teacher. Every press conference, like this is a guy who understands defense, that understands his defense. He understands football and is like passionate about teaching that. And he speaks about it in such a way that like you can see how that comes across to the player. So I think for me, his press conferences more than anything is hearing him talk and be like, okay, like I can see the teacher that he is in there as well. That's I think that's what really gets me kind of on that train. Now, if they give up 40 in the first 3 weeks, each week, I will turn on that real quick. But I think you can see that in there.
Yeah, vibes only are that's not enough, right? Like you need the other stuff. And so I don't know that we've even seen in Green Bay a vibes higher in a long time. Like at least on defense, like I guess Mike Pettin, but like that was also schematic. Like there were a lot of other reasons for that. Like that wasn't just, hey, this guy seems like he gets it and is a cool hang. But Jeff Hafley seems like all of those things. For a defense, though, like I feel like, to your point, philosophy, attitude, that is so much more important than anything else. Like you can play, like even now, Gus Bradley, the Colts, everyone knew what the Colts were running every freaking down, and they weren't the worst defense in the league. Like that tells you a lot about just like how it's coached, how it's instilled, the culture, all that stuff. Like everyone knows what Jim Schwartz is going to do in Cleveland, but they had the dudes and they have an attitude, and it is fundamental to how you play defense in a way that it's just not for offense.
Yeah, and I think too when you get a guy too there that like, I think this was part of Barry's problem, right? It was like Barry floated between. Barry had multiple problems. One of his problems was he floated between different schemes, right? And he was hired in to run that quarters thing. He was supposed to run the Brandon Staley defense. Like he didn't really come up in that world. He was just, that was his last stop. And then LaFleur hired him and he was like, all right, do this. And that's, I think it's Ollie Connolly talks about this a lot. Like you can't, unless you understand everything about what you're doing, you don't know how to fix it when something breaks. And that was how I got about Barry, was like this. He comes in, all right, I'm running quarters. We got too high. You know, we're gonna bring it. I think their disguise rate was super high, but it was always like, if you disguise at over a 50% rate, it doesn't matter, because like they're at too high, they're probably spinning down. Like they're gonna do single high anyway. And so when things started going wrong, he didn't really have answers for it. Hafley seems like, and if you watch his defenses at BC as well, from the time he was there to the time he left, they change depending on who he has there. Like there is this kind of like, I've got my system, I've got my scheme, but I also like, I know when it needs to be tweaked, and I know how to do that. I know what levers to pull, because I know what to do when it gets broken. I think that's, to me, that's the bigger thing. Like you said, all that comes down to, you need to have, I think, your base philosophy. You have to know what you're going to do, but you have to know how to fix it when things get broken, which I think Hafley knows how to do. He knows how to be flexible, but he also just has a way of teaching. It doesn't matter if we're playing quarters, we're getting in dudes' faces. Like we're not, no free releases. Like you've got this very specific attitude that I think you need for defense. And again, we'll see what happens, but it gets me excited to hear a guy come in and talk like that. And you see that on the film of his past, as far as how he's operated as well.
More with Dusty Evely in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You've heard a lot of talk about FanDuel. We talk about it a lot on this show, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Looking for some ways to make some money with that first $5 bet? Well, you can bet the Packers 9.5 on the total. Yeah, you got to have a little juice laid on that one, but I have it. I feel really good about it. 9.5, come on, they're going to win 10 or 11 games if they're even mildly healthy. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in Locked On's local experts and you can get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the Madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Yeah, and I think cynically you can say, okay, a press conference, like it's easy to come in and win the press conference, right? It's easy to come in and say all the right things. But Jeff Hafley, every time, it's like you see the communicator, you see the teacher, you hear players talk about he's instilling the why. Like that is big. Like remember when Sean McVay, his first year in LA, like every piece that was written about Sean McVay was he was in the classroom with his players going, this is why we do it this way. And he's willing to engage with them. And Jair Alexander talked about, hey, Jeff Hafley like asked us some of these things and why it works for us. And so I do think you can glean certain things from a press conference because you understand their philosophy as a teacher and you see it manifest in interesting ways. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. I know you're champing at the bit to do that because this offense is really fun to study. No one studies it in more granular detail. It's like you, Ben Fennell, Bobby Peters. Like that's the list of people that have studied this offense in as granular and like everyone in the building at 1265.
Sure.
That's the list. So the question that I wanted to try and answer, or that I was looking for an answer to, is how does this version of the offense evolve now that we see Jordan Love is what he is, now that we see these receivers can do what they can, and you have a better understanding of what that skill set looks like, right? Like those are important pieces. To you, what is the most intuitive way to evolve this offense moving forward?
Man, I mean, I think the 12 stuff I'm looking forward to a lot. I think the stuff they do with Musgrave and Kraft, because they ran at the 3rd highest rate last year, despite the fact that like Kraft was unplayable in the first half and Musgrave was injured in the back half. So I'm excited to see how that goes. I think we saw a shift in it somewhat last year in terms of like just how they ran some of the offense. I don't know if we want to get into the wide receiver one, blah, blah, blah stuff, but they used to do with
we
Devontae.
can, but I might vomit.
That's fine. Yeah, so say we all. I mean, with Devontae, and then even post Devontae, what they wanted to do so much was like those unbalanced sets, those 4x1, 3x1 sets with Devontae as the backside, or they had Dobbs as the backside. They ran more 2x2 than anything last year. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if like that's something they lean into. Obviously, a lot of stuff with motion, they lean into motion really heavy as well. So I think that continues, but a whole lot of, I think what we didn't see a lot of, and this is a weird nitpicky thing, is like more switch releases off the line to kind of play with defenses with the 2x, like you can't do that out of 3x1, like you can to one side, but like you can't really 2x2, you can do that. And so I think we saw them lean into that a little bit more last year. It's like the single back stuff with one back, usually like a tight end in line to one side, so you can kind of switch off the other side there. I think how they mix their wide receivers, I think they probably have a better, like you said, their skill sets, kind of what those guys are able to do. We saw week 2 last year, we started seeing more of, Wicks scored that touchdown against the Falcons, motioning into a dagger, which like we don't see. He's motioning across, and then he's also the dude with like the 15-yard in cutter. That's something they didn't really do before because they didn't have the dudes to do it with. They figured that out with Wicks, and they figured out they could do that with everyone. And so I think kind of the mix and match of it, but then also seeing what those guys do well. I do want to see in those unbalanced sets. I think Wicks is probably the guy on the other side, probably draw up some more stuff for Dobbs on the play side. I think it is more kind of an understanding of what those guys do. I think for me, Watson is the big one. I mean, Watson for so long was the gadgety dude until they're like, oh, he can run routes. And then he's just been injured, and they had him on those big crossers, and then he'd get injured. And so I think they kind of had Jaden Reed step into that role a bit, I guess, with like some of the jet sweepy stuff. I'd like to see them get away from that a little bit more. I like the motion, but they lean a little too heavy on the preset on the jet stuff for my liking, those little push passes at times. See him run 10 in a game. That's too much. So I think you can dial back some of the horizontal. I think that's kind of where I'm at with some of this stuff, is so much of the Shanahan McVay stuff. A lot of that is you get the horizontal and vertical stretch, but it really is more horizontally based as far as like an offense, right? It's the boot. You're going left to right. You're trying to work those levels, You're trying to work those floods. I think where this goes, as I'm talking through it, I think where this goes with the skill set of the guys that they have, with kind of what they figured out last year, what they can do with motion, what they can do off of that, I think we see a more vertically attacking offense. We're not talking Eric Coryell here or anything. It's not a bombs away type approach.
I mean, why not? Don't threaten me with a good time, Dusty.
Listen, dude, I've been watching some Colts stuff, and like some of the stuff they're running, like just do some of those things. I do think we see a more vertically based attack just because of the dudes they have, like even again Musgrave, even some of the stuff Kraft did. Like I don't think you have to work in that horizontal intermediate world. I think you can go a little more vertical with it.
Well, just think about what we saw in the Cleveland game. They had the run to Josh Jacobs, and then they had 2 dialed up shot plays. Like the first one is they were trying to hit Watson on a big over route. The Browns played it really well. A designer coverage in the preseason. Jim Schwartz, you magnificent bastard! Like, that's the fun stuff that you see. Jeff Hapley was like, "Nah, we're showing 0 in the preseason. Thank you very much." But then third down, they're like, "We're going slot fade. Like, let's go. Like, let's see it on a safety." Dontavian Wicks. We had Warren Sharp on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the difference in the motion rate and the explosive play rate, and those were directly correlated. The more motion that they used, the more often they were able to create explosives. And you saw them go to some of this cool Mike McDaniel, not like Kyle Shanahan. He does it a little bit too, but Mike McDaniel is the number one purveyor of the cheat motion. And the Packers used it. They're sending tight ends in cheat motion, Dusty. You love to see it. And I just think like that is one of those things, again, 2x2. Like, okay, someone starts out like Jaden Reed. How many times did he line up on the outside and he motions to the slot and then is running a route? And it's sort of like, if you're a corner, how are you supposed to run with Jaden Reed, who runs 4.39 or whatever it is, and he's coming from the boundary? Now you're a boundary corner, not a slot corner, and you got to chase Jaden Reed across the formation, and then you got to chase him across the field. Like, that seems like one of those things where, okay, now let's do that with Luke Musgrave. Let's see what that looks like. Hey, why don't you do that with Marshawn Lloyd? Let's see what that looks like. Like, let's really have some fun. And it's like the Packers are only scratching the surface of what they can do with some of these things.
Yeah, I think the Reed one. I mean, you're the exact same as me. You think of Reed going in motion on the cheap motion. It's the Wicks touchdown against Dallas. I mean, and that was
Yeah.
that's switching leverage, right? Like it's they switch the coverage so it's slot picking up Reed, but then he's got to scramble to pick up a dude who's screaming across the middle, and now you've got a guy who had outside I think he was basically straight up over Reed. Now outside leverage against Wicks there. So like Wicks now has inside and Wicks runs that post. Like, and that's something that they just couldn't do in the past with the guys they had, right? Like they had one fast guy. It was Trevor Davis, right? And he was MVS, but even MVS was like fast, but
Trevor Davis.
There's a name, right?
Trevor Davis.
Terry Mickens, if you want to go back far enough, if you want to go back that far. But like even those guys was like a very specific skill set. Like MVS, I loved MVS, dude, but he wasn't twitching. You couldn't run him horizontally, and that was their speed guy. So if you run him and you're really trying to threaten that defense horizontally, right, and you're running him in that jet motion stuff, you don't have anyone stretching vertically, so you're losing something there. They've got so much speed. Even a guy like Dobbs, who I don't think plays that fast. Like he still plays faster than all the guys Green Bay has had. Like he can still stretch the seam if you want to, right? Like he's not going to kill you, but he's also like their fourth fastest man. Like there's speed in a way that they've not had in the past that allows them to kind of operate in a way they haven't in the past, especially with the motion. I think they had Reed motion in the back, the backfield a little bit last year as well.
Yeah,
you do some of that stuff, like you said, with Marshawn Lloyd, if that man can hold on to the ball. I would like to see a little more creativity, I think, with how they use their running backs when they split them out. It's not like those guys are route runners.
Yeah.
It's a hitch route. It's a hitch route on the outside. Like, you know what you're getting with that. So I think you can get a little more creative with that stuff. But yeah, the speed they have, dude, and the motion, I think play action, they've dialed back a little bit, and then motion, they dialed up real high. I think that goes a little further this year.
All right. Still more to come with Dusty Evely here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way for you to buy tickets. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Make it easier. Make it faster. It doesn't have to be a hassle to get to your favorite sports event, concert, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, get panoramic views from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what you're getting ahead of time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. What's something you'd love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that lost in childhood? I'm still every day trying to learn more about cooking and wine. Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What would you like to learn? Gardening? A new language? I'd love to be better at Italian. Took Italian in college. I'm not great at it. Or maybe you finally want to beat your best friend in bowling. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back to school era can come at any age. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. And the new Locked On NFL is here, baby. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows a day. First, Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Love espresso. And then stop by the barbershop. I need a cut right now, actually. With Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk, add in the Locked On local experts, that's me, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the Locked On NFL feed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, they were like, the dog goes to 11. Why? Well, because it goes to 11. Like that was what they did, and that's great. I do hope we get to see the running backs more in a vertical passing game. I think of 2019 and Aaron Jones, that Chiefs game. I think of all the time when I'm just like, you can use your running backs like that, and the Packers did it in 2019, and then almost completely stopped doing it like that. And
they would run Jamal Williams on wheel routes. Like they used to put him vertical.
Yeah. They had Josiah DeGuara when he was playing like H-back that 2020 season. They had him on that wheel route against Minnesota right before he got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And look, Josh Jacobs, we've heard a lot about what he's going to do for this passing game, how he's going to impact that. But what I think is interesting is how might this run game evolve? We saw Marshawn Lloyd. USC was running these, like if you watch USC's run game, they were doing some really cool stuff where it's like, it's a zone concept with a puller. Yeah. And it's sort of like, okay, like how are we going to characterize that? So they were doing some cool stuff within the run game. Josh Jacobs, to me, has always been a better gap scheme runner. Yeah. Like counters and duo and like, let's run power with Josh Jacobs. Marshawn Lloyd, I think you can do a little bit of everything with him. How do you think this run game evolves moving forward? And maybe like, I was definitely watching the USC stuff going, hey, this offensive line in Green Bay moves really, really well. Let's steal some of this stuff. Like, let's get some of these guys on the move and see how they do, because I think there's some cool stuff there.
Dude, I don't know. Like before I go into there, I don't know if you were sicko enough to watch the Nevada game, the Arizona late,
yeah,
ended at like 1 a.m. or something. They're doing the old Joe Gibbs stuff where they're pulling, but then running behind the pullers. So they're pulling right, running left. Like,
oh yeah,
put that stuff in there. I mean, for a running game, I think LaFleur for years has been trying to get to more power, more runs, like more just pull those dudes. And he hasn't been able to do it. And I think some of that has been some of the guys that were there couldn't move well. Like they were not good movers in space. And then some of it was the offensive line was in flux. And so he got into this. I mean, you saw other teams do it. I think the Packers leaned into it in a way that other teams did not at this level, which was, like you said, the zone with a puller. Like you had, instead of pulling two guys, they'd pull one and they'd have like I think it's called escort motion. I've seen that called a couple different things, but where they have like the tight end kind of slow motion across, he gets to the guard, the ball's snapped, you're pulling the left guard to the right, and then that tight end is running right there and he's kicking. So he's essentially acting as a second puller, but it's full zone for everyone else. It makes it really easy for everyone else. And it made it to where you could kind of point these power schemes out of a zone look by only having one puller. With the line the way it sits now, I mean, I think this is one of the reasons they drafted Jordan Morgan. Dude can move, right? Yeah. Like they now have 5 guys on this line. You got Walker, who I think is probably the least among them, but can still move. Walker, Jenkins, Myers, for whatever his faults, dude. Like they pulled him as
space.
They pulled him as a center on run schemes about like probably more than anyone other than the Eagles with Kelsey, I would say. Like they were pulling him a bunch.
Yeah.
Morgan and then Zach Tom, like all those dudes can move. And so I think you're at a spot, especially with Josh Jacobs now.
Every time they run duo too, I'm like, oh, Josh Myers, nice block there.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, he's bad in pass pro for the most part, but dude can move, dude.
Yeah.
So if you've got now like Tucker Kraft, who knows how to block, I think LaFleur for 3 or 4 years now has been trying to get to a more power-based scheme and just hasn't. Like this feels like the year with Josh Jacobs, who I do think like lives a little more in there. And then all these guys that can pull, I think we see that a little more. Now, whether it works or not, I don't know, but he does have in his bag. I mean, the pin pull stuff he was doing, where you got the tight ends and even like Christian Watson as a pinner on the pin pull stuff, just washing dudes down the line. And then you pull a single guard around the edge. Like I do think they lead more into puller or into power. They've been wanting to do this for years. So I think LaFleur has just been, please let this be the year. Please let this be the year. But if it doesn't work, like they've got something that works. They've got the zone stuff with escort motion and a puller. That's just been killer for them.
Escort motion, by the way, is one of my favorite football phrases, by the way. And also, I was just watching, I'm going to forget the play, but I was just watching some stuff the other day. And I was like, oh, yeah, they would just motion Christian Watson in tight to the formation and let him dig out safeties and linebackers at the point of attack. And he'd do it. And it's like, for whatever misgivings you have about Christian Watson, and look, I understand some of them. He will block, and I don't mean just block like he'll just go stock block a corner. Like, no, he will go dig out a safety. He will go seal if you need him to do that at the goal and the goal line. We're talking about like collision stuff, not just like, let me get in the way. And this is a no block, no rock team.
Oh, they had him. If you look at the stuff they're doing with Lazard, they had Watson doing the same stuff, doing the exact same thing, only he runs a 4-3. Like you'd watch him, like you said, seal or wash down a linebacker. Like, and he could do that. We saw him do that at college. I think that's one of the reasons they got him. That thing, he's aligning underneath a tight end on the goal line, and there's zero complaints, and just absolutely washing dudes out. Like just a tremendously fun player that does tremendously fun things that I just hope stays healthy, because he does so much fun stuff in this offense.
I've been saying this all year, all offseason. He is the key to this offense. If he is healthy, they can be the best offense in the league. They can be everything that we think they should be. And I can't wait to see it. He's healthy now, and that's the key. And so, Eagles week 1, we've seen Christian Watson play well against the Eagles before. Let's see. And also, I was thinking about this as we were talking about, those vertical rights for running backs. I think you and I have talked about this, off air before. The most impressive throw from Jordan Love in that first Philadelphia Eagles game was a throw that didn't even get completed. That whole shot along the rail to Aaron Jones was unbelievable, and Aaron Jones couldn't come down with it, and so it's incomplete, and so it doesn't go down as like a highlight for Jordan Love. But that was one of those where I know both you and I were like, wait a second, like that was incredible.
Well, that was like, we've talked to this again. So, but that was the read on that too, right? Because they were like, they're trying to, they're running like sticks. They're running like a 5-yard out, and the Eagles trap it. So, as the processing of that, as far as like, it'd be very easy, a 3-step drop, throw that. He saw him and just was like, all right, I'm gunning before the guy can get there. Like tremendous processing. And that throw, like you said, I think that was back shoulder, like would have been tough to come down with. But yeah, that was one of those, okay, all right, we might have something here.
Turns out they did. And now let's see, he's I think he's like 3rd or 4th in MVP odds. So like, it's crazy to think of where we came from a year ago this time to where we are now sitting and watching this team. Dusty, I always appreciate the time. We will do this again, I'm sure, multiple times probably over the course of the season. Enjoy week 1, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you.
All right. Thanks to Dusty for joining the show. Always wonderful to talk with him. Back tomorrow, Lily Zhao for his Zhao You Doing, and then our crossover Thursday. And then Friday is game day. It's game day. Let's go week 1. We're here. We did it. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, you want to go follow us on the social medias, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're there, Locked On Packers, Facebook too. And then we're live after the game, Friday night on YouTube. So you can stay Locked On Packers.